Well, it's been a huge morning already. And we now move into the part of the day where we have some really insightful parts of the program because we have our lived experience presenters. And our first speaker is Carissa Wright. And Carissa is a full-time peer support worker and a facilitator of her own peer support group called Embracing Borderline Personality Disorder. And in this presentation, Carissa is going to help us to understand and articulate the obstacles and navigation to get to the destination of facilitating her own support group, which is no small feat. Can we welcome Carissa Wright to the stage, please?
Thanks, Dee. I just want to extend the acknowledgement of country to the traditional custodians of the land, and I wish to pay my respect to the past, present and emerging. Firstly, I'd like to thank Estelle and Rita for having me here today. Their tireless efforts behind the scenes should never go unnoticed, and I thank them for taking me in about 4 years ago when I reached out to the foundation wanting to know how to be involved. They've only shown professionalism and understanding throughout the time we have known each other. I also want to thank everyone else who is behind the scenes of these events, and thank you for giving us a platform to share our lived experience. Today I'll be sharing parts of my story and how I came to build my own peer support group known as Embracing BPD, based in Western Australia. I want to remind everyone that my story is individual and the best practice observed for treating borderline personality disorder is different for everyone. So without further ado, here's my discovery with borderline personality disorder, which I will refer to as BPD throughout my presentation. I'm open to answering questions after. However, if I do kindly decline, it might be because I don't have the energy to answer. So please don't take that personally. I hope you can take something home from my presentation, and I hope this can spark hope for people with lived experience who feel like nothing is working. I'm living proof that it does get better with the right supports, tools and skills in place. So that's beautiful personality that is disordered, which I like to refer as BPD. Pictured here is me around 9, growing up in the southwest region of Western Australia. I have fond memories as a child. I was fortunate enough to have sporadic moments of freedom, riding my bike up sandy tracks, creating worlds of cubby houses with torn down materials left from burnt out cars, stable friendships with childhood neighbours. I remember a childhood of laughter, warmth and security. I guess the feeling of responsibility comes to you when you are older. I remember when I was a child, running down those bush tracks with a stick in one hand, laughing and being free. I was never prepared for the turmoil I was faced with when we grow up. Nothing prepares you for what happens when you're older, and to have that sense of self fade away can be a daunting feeling. My mental health challenges started for me when I was in my early teens. I had a deflated sense of self, becoming disjointed in the high school system. I was highly regarded by my peers as I was a student counsellor. However, often I felt isolated and disconnected from my friends that were around me. I responded sensibly to criticism and vulnerable when I felt like I'd failed people. I was able to notice in hindsight how unhealthy this was for me back then. However, not being able to have an outlet of education around the topic of mental health, the start of my intervention was a rocky one. I first received my diagnosis in a psychiatric facility when I was 17, where I stayed for 2 weeks after trying to take my own life. Suicidal thoughts were often thought and felt, and I felt my mind slowly caving in. I often describe my BPD feelings, thoughts and emotions as suffocating, as I felt I had no room to breathe when I tried so desperately hard to regulate what was going on in my head. This was the start of the long and tiresome road to recovery, or whatever term you like to use for recovery. I like discovery. I was a familiar face in WA's mental health system, even to the point the emergency department staff knew me by my first name. My navigation of the system lasted 13 years, with a lot of stop and starting, relapses, wait lists, and mistreatments. Although experiencing great turmoil through my recovery process, I also had brief, small moments that made a huge positive impact. Such as the nurse who would have a chat to me when I was feeling distressed. Like the time the psychologist cried when I shared a part of my trauma and reassured me the crying was a feeling of empathy and compassion. The friend that sent me flowers for my mental health to remind me that they were thinking of me. All these small moments I held on to because in hindsight, it helped ease the excruciating amounts of pain I was experiencing. However, when you're at the midst of a crisis, when your mind is at its darkest, it's hard to see the hindsight at the time. The cycles that come with the BPD diagnosis are vicious. You are constantly contradicting your thoughts with how you feel and how you feel with your thoughts. The self-dialogue you have can be the most terrifying and lonesome experience any human being could experience. I experienced disassociation to the point my memory of self-destructive behaviours seems merely a haze. My fear of abandonment weathered me down to the point that I felt paralysed. Mental illness is felt on so many levels and so many layers that it is as painful as any physical pain the human body can experience. Now you're probably wondering how I'm standing here in front of you today, sharing the most vulnerable parts of myself. My journey to recovery left me battered and bruised. However, when faced with adversity, life can lead you to the most wondrous levels of living. I know this next point of my experience opened new doors of growth and healing and learning. During one of the most intensely isolating BPD experiences of my life, I felt like I was clutching at strings to stay alive. Before my 27th birthday, I was in a very codependent relationship where my BPD symptoms reared its confronting head. I felt the illness completely taking over, and my sense of self was slowly disappearing. My usual routine of relying on the mental health system only brought back brief moments of survival. However, the pain was not fading away. I so desperately wanted to heal, I wanted to soothe the pain, and I wanted my life back. All the supports I had in place, I could not uphold because I was sick and my body was completely shutting down. We tend to focus on the behavioural symptoms that are associated with mental illness, that we tend to neglect the physical impact that surviving a mental illness can bring. One night I remember I was at my wit's end with the system. I had a welfare check and was taken to emergency for a few hours only to be taken home again, as we tend to view people with BPD as attention-seeking when they voice how they are suicidal, which is not the case at all. I wanted help, and I took that chance only to be placed back into the vicious cycle I was in. I was exhausted, scared, agitated, and distant. That night, I couldn't see myself being here for my 30th birthday. I didn't see myself having a career, falling in love, experiencing what every other person around me seemed to be experiencing. I wanted so badly to function at a balanced level. So I took a deep breath and I got my laptop out. I set out to find other alternatives to help cope with the turmoil I was experiencing at the time. I remember throughout my experience in the mental health system, not once did someone tell me that I was not alone, that other people experience BPD, that there were effective treatments with positive outcomes. I only knew responses as, "You don't look suicidal," "Sorry, we don't have enough beds," "If you aren't on medication, then I cannot offer you treatment at the psychiatric facility," "If you don't stop this behaviour, we will call the police." I know if someone turned around and shared their own lived experience with me, that it would have completely changed my life. And that is exactly what happened that night in my room. I scrolled the internet, went on YouTube and typed in borderline personality disorder. I came across Amanda Wang, an advocate with lived experience, who was based in New York City. I watched a 5-minute clip of Amanda sharing her lived experience, what supports she had in place, and her overall experience with recovery. Hearing someone articulate their experience whilst isolated and silenced opened so many doors to exploring my own journey with BPD. Last year, I got to meet Amanda pictured here at the Women's in Mental Health Gala in New York, where I worked with Emotions Matter. They're a non-for-profit organisation for BPD, and they are determined to fight the healthcare system over in New York. They are also strong advocating for peer support, so meeting Amanda was like I just imagined, a calming, healing and connected experience that will stay close to me for the rest of my life. After the power of hearing someone else share their lived experience, something ignited in me. I was more determined to survive the storm that comes with experiencing BPD. And I learnt that while trying to work towards self-management of the trauma and experiences you have, that it's not a linear process. It was okay to say no to treatments and help if it didn't benefit your experience. It was okay to seek alternatives outside of what you know. Eventually, I was led to dialectical behavioural therapy 13 years after my diagnosis. There was a picture of Marsha, but it's not up there. But I think everyone knows who Marsha is in this room. She is a therapist who invented DBT based off their own lived experience. I know a lot of pain and re-traumatisation could have been avoided if I was introduced to this therapy as an early intervention. However, I'm also a firm believer of timing. I'm just very grateful that I was alive to be able to have my moments of healing and learning. Everyone's journey with BPD is unique, and what works for one person may not work for others. However, DBT for me was a life-saving moment, and that also inspired me to start my own BPD support group. After my New York trip, something shifted in me. The peers that I had met overseas really showed me what determination, strength and community looked like for BPD. Over in WA, I never really saw peers coming together to actively work and support each other towards inclusiveness in the BPD area, for BPD specific. I was sitting in my TAFE class last year, where I was studying peer support work at the time, questioning what I could do outside the already established advocacy and peer work I'd done over the years. And this is where embracing BPD came to life. I remember turning to a classmate and asking their opinion on the idea I had, and their encouragement really gave me confidence to back myself to be able to create a safe, inclusive and connecting space here in Western Australia. I made notes in my TAFE workbook about how I could pull this off. I had friends close to me who also experienced BPD, and with their creativity, we were able to start building on the ideas I had. The logo you saw on the slide at the start was designed by a peer from our group. The photos that are taken at our sessions, the one like here, with consent and permission, by the way, are done by our peers. Community and connection are two things that I value and wanted to implement into our peer space, and they were already apparent by the first session I ran. The name Embracing BPD was inspired by a 2013 presentation Dr. Keith Gaynor of Ireland gave about BPD. I remember watching it, and it was the first time I had seen a doctor respectfully navigate the complexity of BPD from a clinical perspective. Learning to embrace this diagnosis is what helps me stay alive. Learning to confront flaws that come with BPD head-on is what I try to model in my peer support group. And encouraging self-acceptance and understanding that the flawed aspect of BPD does not define who we are. You choose to see the behaviours, however, what people seem to miss is the entrenched feeling of internal pain that people with BPD who are left untreated face every single day of their lives. The main core of the peer space I've created is to allow people to learn at their own pace, and more importantly, to learn off each other. Even though the skills that are taught in group are based around what I learnt in DBT, every individual has their own skill set as well on offer. So we all come together, connect over our experience and bounce off each other by building up each other's confidence and strength. In clinical models, we tend to focus on the lot of the trauma and the negativity that comes with the diagnosis, which is important. However, at Embracing BPD, the activities we do are based around the positivity we offer as individuals, sharing the negative aspects and blending it all into one by learning how to validate our own experience as well as the peers around us. Another great aspect about group is that everyone is at different stages of their recovery. So we set examples to the people who may be at the start of their own journey. What makes peer support special and separates it from clinical is that you cannot see someone model the reality of recovery through therapy treatments. You don't get to see the relapses, the hardest parts, the anguish. In therapy models, you get to see the end results, which can mislead people into thinking a recovery process is a walk in the park. Sharing and seeing lived experience in one room is what helps people walk beside each other on a path that is not linear, with the end result modelling hope. Lastly, the best thing about group is the peer friendships we have all made, like this one here. A lot of clinical group spaces do not encourage this, and I remember it feeling like people don't trust the process of friendships while in the midst of recovery. However, I again have placed safe approach into this to make connections in group and trusting the peers at the very beginning. This is another strong attribute in our group, as the BPD journey can feel like a very lonesome one. Having a space to come together once a week, laughing while also acknowledging the darkness of mental illness can be instrumental in peers keeping their head above water when they feel like they're going under by themselves. Connection is a vital part of making someone feel like they have a place in this world. Recently, a friend messaged me to say how proud they are of me and that for a while they didn't see me being here today. I wanted to remind everyone that people who experience adversity such as I have, we have a lot to offer if you give us the chance. If you give us a chance to live and prevail, we can be a gateway to help others overcome their own adversity as well. If you give us a chance to see us outside the hospital walls, outside the behaviours you define us by, outside the stigma that is associated with this diagnosis, I can guarantee you your life will change and become better. I know my life has changed for the better just being in this space and living outside the box that people tried to place me in. I want to thank my peers that come to support group and the peers in this room as well. You really are a driving force that keeps me learning more and more about BPD and what we need to do to face the epidemic in the mental health system that BPD, along with other complex mental illnesses, are faced with every day. I want to thank everyone who took their time to listen to my story today, and I'm hoping that you can take something positive about BPD with you home. The best practice deserved is to be given the chance to receive the help we desperately need. No one should be turning you down from treatment because of the stigma that is still attached. Remember, it's a beautiful personality that when the light goes out, it can really be dark. But that does not mean the light is gone forever. We just need a safe space to find it again. Thank you.